Jared, did you see the stream pop up?
Oh, I think so, mate. I managed to
Oh yeah, I see it. You shared it.
you see it? Okay,
Yeah.
sweet.
Excellent. Look at that. There's cheering. There's cheering for you. It just happened. Well, hello everyone. This is Trip, and my kids just went to bed. Jared's down under just went to school, and so the time at which we could connect has arrived, and we're glad you're here. Did you see the title I gave for our conversation?
No, tell me again, Drew. We're giving the beast to some. Yeah, nice, mate. That's great.
Well, I was reading, for those who don't know, Jared's now on Substack, and has been doing a series because, believe it or not, it appears that we are just starting wars again for whatever reason. And Jared's had some really great resources there. And so I thought we would try to give the beast a stomach ache. And as we explore some of the stuff that comes up in the starter kit for peacemaking in a time for war. So very glad to be hanging out. And maybe before we get going and stuff, you wanna let people know kind of what you've been up to vocationally and things, where the kind of moment we're in now, going on with Iran and everything, that this isn't the first time thinking about peacemaking and such has been on your agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Trip. Mate, it's kind of disturbing how you can trade out the Q for an N, and it feels like we've shot back 20 plus years to what was happening when I actually lived in your country. So I went to Lipscomb University. Some people might know Lipscomb in Nashville during 2001, and was there during the horrors of September 11th. And then what rolled out in the lead up to the invasion of Afghanistan, and then in 2003, Iraq. And during that period, Trip, that was kind of like my conscientization or baptism into activism. October 2002, I risked arrest at a US military base, the first time, but not the last time in my life, which is actually in the center of Australia. Pine Gap US military base is one of many military bases we have in Australia. And I wrote about that. And Walter Wink, I sent him my reflections on it, and he got me published for the first time, which was really lovely. He sent me a little note back, Trip, saying, this is really badly written, but great content. Get somebody to help you clean it up. And my dyslexic self continues to try and write, knowing that it isn't my natural tongue. And so very much it feels like for some of us, this is deja vu, that we're in a situation that, but unlike it, at least President George W. Bush had a plan for Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya, and we can name any number of conflicts, Syria, and it doesn't even seem like there's a plan this time. So I'm still trying to follow that nonviolent Messiah we encounter in the Gospels, as our world is at war again.
Mm-hmm. And what was your, at what point in your own journey did the kind of thread of nonviolent resistance in the ministry of Jesus and its applicability for kind of the relationship of modern nation states, when did that become kind of something central for your own understanding of the faith and its practice?
Yeah, like many stories, you can start at a number of different places, right? It was definitely, I didn't grow up I grew up in a US fundamentalism imported into Australia, but it wasn't dispensationalist. Restorationist, the Church of the Christ, as it's referred to in Australia, which is kind of the equivalent of Disciples of Christ or the Christian Church. But I grew up in a strange wing of it for the first 10 years of my life, known as the non-denominational Churches of Christ, which is the a cappella lot in both the US. And so unlike evangelicalism, Trip, and you grew up Southern Baptist, yeah? So like there's this focus on personal conversion. In these circles, it was much less about saving people from hell and much more about restoring the early church. And so because of that focus, there was this sense of taking seriously the words of Jesus, and war was something that was debated in those circles. And so I wasn't allowed to play with guns as a kid. So when I started to be involved in nonviolent direct action, I joked with my mum, "This is your fault. If you'd let me play with guns, obviously I wouldn't
You'd have
doing
known
this."
how cool it was.
That's
You see,
right.
in real biblical families in the South, you obviously play with guns, but you wouldn't do unbiblical things like masturbate or dance.
Well, and particularly with guns, that could be extremely dangerous.
Oh,
Like,
look, you have to know, that what tools are appropriate for what situations, and, it creates problems. So you were an undergrad on 9/11, and I was too, and I mean, even coming from, Baptist situation in the South, mine weren't like the fundamentalist kind, and my family
mm,
is pretty split of from, like, my grandfather was the chief master sergeant of the Air Force, and my dad's bumper sticker was, "When Jesus said, 'Love your enemies,' I'm pretty sure he didn't mean bomb them."
yeah, great.
So,
Good
like,
one, Dad.
there was both expressions
Mm,
in the family, but the it was the predicament of being a church planter's kid is you're always at a church that your family started. So, uh, I didn't really realize how atypical we were till I was in undergrad at a Baptist university, and
mm,
then I'm meeting other people, I'm like, "Oh, you're like in my tribe," and then 9/11 happens, and they don't think, "Pray for your enemies," because now
sure.
we know we have some. They're like, insert Islamophobic statements, militarism, nationalism, and that experience just made me sit there going, have you read the Bible? I know you
Mhm,
say that you really believe it,
mm,
but the shouldn't there be some effort? And I'm not saying there isn't even good reasons eventually for
mm,
thinking about, like, the need for some type of state violence or police-like activity or these kinds of things, but, like, you don't get there immediately, and you
mm,
don't glorify it, and it shouldn't be normative and just assumed, you know? Um, and I think that experience, like, was so, uh, like, off-putting that it was like,
sure.
if you can cheerlead this, like, I remember telling a friend that was, like, a leader in the Baptist Student Union, and, was th like, they're just cheering right when we start blowing stuff up in Iraq, and I'm like, "They're not even
Mm,
the same kind of Muslims." And,
that's
that
right.
would be like
That's
going,
r
"Oh, well, we're really upset, with all those angry Catholics in Ireland, so what we did is we went to Brazil, and there's a bunch of Pentecostals because they're related. They both have crosses."
Yeah,
And you're like, "They're
yeah.
not related."
It's, I think one of the gifts that you had in that experience, right, is being able to have several lenses to view a situation, to be able to relate to uh, that form of Christianity that you were surrounded by in larger university setting, but also something that says, "Nah, that that ain't it." And I think part of the gift of my dad migrated to Australia in the 70s, and he was last in his family out during the Troubles, because he was actually still part of a monastery in Dublin.
Mhm.
although the family's from the north. And my dad came into this form of Christianity that I'd spent the first decade of my life in, as someone who was previously a monk, and as someone who was in an order that cared for traditionally the sick and the dying. So he was a trained nurse as well. So my dad came to Australia and was a union organizer and met my mum. And so I had both Catholic social teaching in my formation as a kid, this restorationist restorer of the early church, even though the early church weren't trying to restore anything, they were trying to open and receive God's future. So it's a different mentality completely. But I also had Dad's perspective as someone who's like a lefty and involved in, and those multiple lenses. And then as my dad jokes that we were the emerging church before he ever read a book by Brian McLaren, that in the 90s, their mum and dad joked that it was they're called a Fundamentalist Anonymous, their little house church, which grew into a larger church that was the place of my formation. And what was fascinating, Trip, is actually receiving Americans who came to be missionaries in Australia and realizing that there was so much of their Christianity, bless them, that was just kind of devoid of the way of Christ. And my biggest, I was actually sharing this with Brian Recker earlier in the week, that my biggest faith crisis was actually not, and some people know these parts of my story, that I'm a survivor, and I exposed a pedophile who people helped skip the country, and then he was actually caught years and years later. But that stuff wasn't the kind of the large faith crisis. My best friend driving of a drug overdose wasn't the big faith crisis. The biggest faith crisis was actually moving to America and experiencing white American evangelicalism, and 9/11 happening, and not recognizing any of this and being like, is this Christianity? Because if so, I think I'm out. Like I don't know where I fit in this. And thankfully, the influence of Orthodoxy and the Catholic worker movement was really significant, and then like an introduction to Anabaptism, to try and bring these different threads together into something that could actually speak of what we see in the life of Jesus, that I find so attractive, yet am so dismayed by so much of this stuff that passes for Christianity.
Mhm. Mhm. So, I had a few questions, just after reading your recent series of posts on Substack, and
Hmm.
and one of them is, like, in thinking about what to do, um, you dwell up front with what do we do with what we feel? Like, how do
Mm.
we process the emotional and spiritual weight, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, as parents, I'm sure
Yeah.
in you and I and any parents, that the idea that we were rather lazy and took out of school and over 100 kids died,
Yeah, that's
or
amazing.
that oh, we might not have enough defensive missiles, so we want to escalate things and take out desalination plants in a
Mhm.
city of millions that were already having trouble getting enough clean water,
Mm.
knowing they're in a desert. And this is
Yeah,
going to mean parents are holding kids, um, as they watch them die.
yeah.
That's what our tax money is doing. There wasn't a constitutional process or even a
Yep.
communication that's going on. Um, it is so difficult, um, to know what to do with that. Like, on
Mhm.
top of everything else that's been going on, like,
Mhm.
which
Yeah, totally.
the train wreck is significant. And so I'm, as someone who's been both activated by the nonviolent tradition and leadership and thinking about it for a while, why focus there? Like, what do we do with what we feel? And why start
Mm.
there and thinking about kind of a handbook for this moment?
Yeah, and I mean, confession, Trip, maybe some of it's like me starting where I need to start so I can actually be of use. I think I even call that like how to be of use to others or how to serve others in a time of war. That I think actually starting with how do we process what's going on and putting in practical things. I pastor two different communities on either side of this large continent that you find on maps as Australia, and from both communities, people's responses on top of everything else, as you were rightly talking about. And we had a terrorist attack in Bondi, a beach in Sydney, late last year in Australia, and there's been a rollout of hate speech laws, which have actually rolled back civil liberties in Australia. So Australia is dealing with all of this as well. And people from both these communities have responded by saying, one response is, I can't stop doom scrolling. Like, I'm just like constantly consuming everything. And others saying, I've just turned all media off. And I think part of the place of prayer, once we move past prayer being a mechanism or magical thinking, is actually how do we be present to all that which we swim in that moves through us, and start to sort it so we can listen to that still small voice that's deeper. And so one of the things that I put in the post is like a little kind of it's almost like a movement of 4 actions that we can take to continually check in with it. Is it useful kind of speaking to that?
Oh, no. I thought it was really helpful.
Yeah, cool. So the first one is simply silent prayer. And I use the language of silent prayer because often talk of contemplative prayer has become so wanky and so specialized that it's almost like an elite class for super Christians, or it's marketed to us as like a certain product. Oh, like this is meditation for like, it's instead of like, no, actually, in ancient Christianity, nepsis, the word used in the New Testament for like vigilance or watchfulness, or what it is to actually be awake. It's related to sobriety. Is talked about as like the cardinal virtue in prayer, that it's that ability to be present to what is going on for us. And so it's from that space that we start to sort through all the stuff that we've been consuming. And so the first one I put is silent prayer. Maybe I'll just name them initially. The second one is media intake boundaries. The third is community support. And the fourth is discerning next steps. But they're actually all intimately related. Like the media boundaries is what feels appropriate for you to both like stay informed yet keep responsive. And rather than the doom scrolling kind of habits of some of us, that if I understand more, then they'll have some agency, or switching off completely, what is going to be the kind of practices. And I was sharing with my friend Daniel from Across the Divide, a wonderful Palestinian Christian podcast in English, that for me, it's literally the habit of watching Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez and Namin Sheikh for 15 minutes on Democracy Now! For the news updates, and then spending an equal amount of time to that trip actually in the silence, being able to actually compost this stuff that's happening in the world and pay attention to what it brings up in us. And that for me is enough. That's my media intake. And some people like are surprised by that, particularly how like involved I am in social change work, that's it. But that's what I found is sustainable for me. It's also what a part of that is I don't actually watch the images. I can't, if I see little ones who are dead, I'm wrecked for a day trip. Like it disturbs me. And part of that is like working in aid development and relief, and some of the things that I see and some of the things that it provokes for us. So having those kind of disciplines to what can I do? And the next one was the community support. It's a place where we can practice mutual aid. It's a place where we can grieve together and process. It's a place where we can actually respond creatively to everything that we're going through, which relates directly to that final step, which is the start of the process again, discerning next steps. What are the community that we're part of where we can take collective action together that empowers and builds agency, rather than leaving those who are desperate and have no option other to respond as the only ones who are responding in these situations.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the things I liked about, the way you put it as a cycle as opposed to like, "Oh, a checklist, I'm just doing this," is, is yes, it's a kind of like an ongoing invitation because at different points and at different times, what, say, your media boundaries looks like varies.
Yeah,
It could
totally.
be for a pragmatic reason, like you just spent 2 years working on a book, so you probably are gonna be on social media more because you want to make sure people know about it and that you
Yeah.
respond, or it could be like, you're working on something that's specific, so you need to keep up with a particular topic, or, it could be that your friends keep posting pictures of their puppies. So but, there are different reasons,
Yeah.
um, that are there, but the kind of cyclical of moving from silence and then thinking about boundaries, finding community, and discerning action, that that it's like when we're in a rhythm of that kind of movement,
Hmm.
then prayer doesn't become a kind of an escapist thing.
That's
You
right.
talk about even the way it can metabolize our grief and our rage and in our
Mm.
anxiety, and oftentimes, especially in um, religious communities, there's there's this kind of like swinging back and forth where some are like, oh well, that's being spiritual. I'm too enlightened for that. We have to get focused on the material reality and changing it and this kind of thing. And others,
Mm.
um, prayer is just it's like some means of controlling the situation with our words,
Mhm.
because we can't acknowledge just how uncontrollable and
Yeah,
monstrous what's going on is,
yeah,
and kind of grounding that process and thinking about our intake, thinking
yeah.
about the community, and then finding a place to act. I think like prayer then becomes like the active agent that helps us move through those, in ways that it's easy to forget when
Mm.
it's almost impossible to avoid pictures of things I
That's
paid
right.
for that
Yeah, yeah.
I just assume I'm going to be in purgatory because of it. Like, that's what
Because
goes
of
through my head. I'm like, I don't know what I would have done differently. I didn't
mm,
vote for it. I don't think anyone got to vote for this,
yeah,
except maybe Netanyahu, and, here we are. But
yeah,
we paid for it.
yeah,
So
and uh, having a trauma-informed lens for all theology we engage and, considering our own spirituality, I think is so important, because there is a place for that cataphatic, words as a way of dealing or even escaping. Is it Chesterton or, is it Tolkien that talks about, I'm going to butcher the quote, so I may as well say it's mine. But that
what was it Jarrod
people who
McKenna
don't,
said?
people who don't understand that there's a place for escapism, have never spent any time in a jail. Like, there is a place for, the imaginative projection elsewhere for a while that actually can be quite healthy. Disassociation itself is actually a way of, our bodies somatically coping, with what we feel we can't cope with. And the question becomes, how do we bring an awareness to this? This is the nepsis again, right? How do we actually, keep vigil and stay sober and be watchful, that we can actually start to discern what it actually is, to jump into imagery from story of Elijah. What is outside the cave that is in us that is just the violent wind and isn't the voice of God? What is the earthquake that is outside the cave and is also in us that isn't the voice of God? What is that fire, that burns outside the cave and is also in us but isn't the voice of God, but is directly related to the trauma that we've experienced and are culpable, in and actually maybe like responsible for, like when he goes off script and calls down fire on the enemies, that it's to draw the connection that what he's encountering, it in that moment is actually directly related to the trauma that he's been a part of that swims outside the cave and in us right now. And then once we're able to identify these things in the silence, that these aren't what we see revealed in the life of the nonviolent Messiah, then we can start to hear that still small voice, that stark void which feels like nothing but is actually everything. With the passing of Jesse Jackson, maybe we can draw the connection that it's that nothingness that we realize we have some bodiness. It's this something that is not over and against others, but puts us in solidarity with others. And humanity no longer is an isolated reality, but is a collective web that we are bound to the sins and the charities of all in every moment right now. And so suddenly prayer no longer is a selfish, I need to get away, or I need to refuel, or I need to retreat. It's instead, how do I love others by realizing that I have not opened to love myself and are being animated by these other forces, these violent weather effects of the soul that occur out there on the news, in community that we engage with and move through us all the time. And Trip, I think learning to discern those things, what it is to become a person of prayer, is essential for effective social change work in this moment in history. It's now a necessity.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really beautiful invitation. One of the all right, I'm just going to you talk. You're exploring, right, like the problematic nature of the word Christian today, but I'll just say, if you spent, I spent 10 years in Los Angeles, then 3 in Scotland, and then came back here for Trump's round 2. And I have never felt so uncomfortable with the label. Like the specificity of which people I interact with, when they hear the word Christian, will project or presume upon you something that historically didn't exist for most of church history, was invented in America by the most anti-intellectual, anti-modern community, and has
which is so deeply modernist at the same time.
Yeah, it's like the inversion of it. Don't worry, they still brush their teeth and get chemo treatments. It's just reading the Bible using intelligence. That's the problem. But the like when I'm trying to think of a nice way of saying this. I feel bad when I say really mean things, but okay. You saw the story, right, of the U.S. commander telling soldiers that Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon. Like, and that, like, for that to happen and the guy still have a job means it's not just like it slipped out and you got to dial it back and be like, sorry, America's army is as diverse as a country, so we probably shouldn't pick that. Like, he's still employed and still in charge. So it just makes me uncomfortable. I used to think it was funny when people said, "No, I'm a follower of Jesus," or they would come up with these other things. So I'm like, no, like, they're not real Christians. Like, that's not real Christianity. Why are you going to let them steal it? But the more I've been back in this mess where people that don't know any different just presume MAGA Christianity is definitional, and any way you part with it, you're just wussing out on being a real Christian. I'm like, oh, sorry, that was just Tripp's therapy session, inventing.
Yeah.
But
mate, 2 things come to mind, right? Like, one is that article that I sent to Walter Wink that I talked about right at the start. My bio for that was so embarrassing. Like, I was 21 years old, and it says something like, Jarrod McKenna is seeking to be a follower of the nonviolent Yeshua. Like, and it was 2002. Don't like, but that kind of like, I don't want anything to do with Christianity. I just want to. I understand that impulse. That was me. Like a period, and it was a Jewish mate that I went to art school with when I was at university, and he just said to me one day, "Get your hand off it. You're a Christian. You need to own it." And hearing that from somebody like who is of a different faith and this challenge to own it, like, stays with me still. So much so that uh, in 2019, was it? I was in Belfast and I was interviewed by the BBC for the work that I was doing there. And part of my family's story is that my family were deeply involved in the Troubles in ways that um, uh, I've in ways that are complex. My extended family were involved in the IRA, and being committed to um, uh, the nonviolent way of Jesus and that history, and trying to honor those complexities. And one of the questions I was asked by the reporter in this hour-long interview is, they said, "Would you identify as Irish? Would you identify as Catholic or Protestant while in Ireland?" And Trip, it's interesting. If you'd asked me in my early 20s, I would have said neither. I don't want anything to do with either. Like, they're both incredibly problematic. In my late 30s, responding at the time, I would have said both. And I don't mean just the good stuff. I mean what Cornel West would call the night side of the traditions as well. I think we have to stay in a place where this very Protestant desire to join the church, of finally this time we've got it right, has to be laid down. And we have to, it goes back to that thing that if humanity is actually a community, this web of creation, what it is for us to confess the sins of others and realize that they're not separate. Anybody who is imprisoned in the industrial prison complex in your nation or mine, their sins are not merely theirs, they're ours. People who are formed in societies. We've had 2 attempted terrorist attacks in my city this year already, both of them carried out by young European Australians who were radicalized online. Both of them were targeting First Nations, Aboriginal people, migrants, and the Muslim community. And people want to go, it's a bad egg, it's one of them, it's they've radicalized online, this isn't who we are as Australians. Trip, I think we need the kind of spiritual maturity to be able to go, no, this is us. And for those of us who are part of the Christian tradition, the Crusades, the Inquisitions, all these realities, they animate the way we even react to those traditions. And so what is it instead to confess these things and be able to own them, confess them, and do something different with them?
Mm-hmm. And right, like you're making a point there, even about the nature of the church, the moment we look at it historically, right? Like the early church did not have a just war theory. That came later. And the just war theory, I wish more Christians knew, because this is the train wreck we're currently in. Like, so I was having a conversation
totally, mate,
with all the people present are professionally religious, and one of them said, well, I mean, look, I'm not sure we should start a war or anything, but if Trump knew they had 20 some of their leaders in one place, blow them up, like, don't you think Obama would have done something like that if you have an opportunity? And, well, let's just say I was proud that I kept my cool. But I mostly kept it by keeping my mouth shut and texting them later. Because I'm just sitting there thinking, like, this is how I want this. You talked about your experience of like Christians in America. This is like, I think Christians in America have this wonderful gift of never having to actually think about foreign policy, because
Ooh,
Even when I lived in Europe, the
yeah.
Scottish knew more about what was going on in America than most
Yep,
Americans at home, right? Like,
yeah.
and I'm like, why do you pay attention to what we're doing? They're like, because we're stuck with it, you know?
That's right. Like, y
But
your
that,
foreign policy influences everything here, everything. Like, it's, um oh, I'm interrupting, don't get me started. You keep going, sorry, mate.
but here's why here's what, like, okay, you know, I think we would both give preference to the nonviolent side of the Christian tradition, but like,
Mm,
look at, like, any of the sides
mhm,
would not say something like, "Well, if, you know, would imagine Obama if he had a chance would just assassinate a bunch of leaders that were getting together under the premise of negotiation." So, like, there's a reason we couldn't imagine Obama doing that because, well, he could have. He literally had a treaty with them for the nukes. They
mhm,
were all together. He didn't kill them. Not only that, when he ran for Senate and ran for president, big feature was being against the war in Iraq when he ran for Senate and when he ran for president, that he didn't vote for it, even though they said it
mhm,
was for regime change in Iraq for Saddam Hussein. So, oddly enough, he never targeted a head of state. Um, so like, it would be odd for him to just suddenly do it because, believe it or not, there are lots of really immoral heads of states, and some
mm,
of us are citizens of ones with immoral heads of
mhm.
states, and we don't think, like, even if it might be a collective good for them not to be in office, that the what happens when you undermine a nation state and its internal integrity and the systems and things that are there are not all that the few at the top that are making the horrible decisions get screwed. It's the
Mhm.
overwhelming majority of the population on the bottom side that does, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, the Trump and Israel get, like, the Iranian leaders together for negotiations twice and go after
Mhm,
them. In his previous administration, he assassinated a political military leader in it,
mhm,
and so, like, the idea, this is what I'm sitting there looking at professional religious people. Well, if he had a chance to take them out, well, there's a reason he wouldn't, because it's a war crime. This isn't even
mhm.
weird, right? It it doesn't meet the conditions of a just war. You can
Yeah.
Google it. I don't have to explain it to you. It didn't meet the criteria during the Crusades. This is
Yeah.
what it, like, there was an attempt on the leader of the Muslim army and the Crusades, like, in the Crusades, the guy who decided to go rogue, leader of a particular unit, to go assassinate the head of the other army that they're trying to kill over Jerusalem. He
Mhm.
didn't receive communion the rest of his life. Why? Because
Yeah.
it's a horrible decision to go assassinating leaders, because the goal of any just war is what? To end it justly and quickly, because the most of the people that die in war are not the ones that benefit from the power to begin with. So,
Mhm.
like, so to me, there's this general blindness to, if you and I talk to these people about any other justice topic, oh, we gotta get rid of ICE. Oh, we gotta change the way we do immigration. We have to have a much more just and quick way of handling refugees. Oh,
Mhm.
we gotta really, develop, non, carbon emitting energy. We should be investing in the sciences and research, and we should be having universal health care. Like, you're just going through anything that just, like, oh, I don't know, neighbors and enemies matter, and they're like, check, 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 check. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I mean, if you got a chance to take out the leaders of the baddies, we should just assassinate them. And that's what I mean. Like, Americans don't think about foreign policy. Everyone else is stuck with it.
Yeah.
And even super smart, intelligent Christians with multiple graduate degrees say stupid like that. Look at me self-editing on a
Mhm.
live stream. And I don't know what to do about it. You're not from here and had to deal with it. So this is, again, trips therapy. What am I supposed to do in that situation other than ask them to come to the Lord?
Well, Trip, here's what I love about your response, and, I've been, accused in the article you're referring to, this, starter kit for peacemaking in a time of another illegal war, of, uh, building steel man arguments, and that's an accusation I wear with pride. Like, for me, part of doing unto others as you'd want them to do unto you is articulating what is dear to our neighbours in ways that they feel accurately represent them. And so while I don't hold to the just war tradition, what I deeply appreciate about the just war tradition is that it is a tradition of intellectual rigor, which actually considers things um, like international structures and communities and whether they sign off on stuff. There is a danger that Christian pacifism, and this is the brilliance of your article drawing on Niebuhr and the danger of the naivety of children of light, is that they don't consider these things. And so pacifism becomes a concern for, are my hands clean? Is my heart pure? While our neighbors suffer and no one responds, instead of what it is to actually step into this costly way that refuses to mirror the domination, dehumanization, injustice, and violence we're up against, and instead creatively responds in a different way. And what just war tradition calls us to is a really staunch commitment to intellectual rigor when considering these conflicts. And the danger is, and this has been some of the criticism of the last Catholic Pope Francis, who in his statements that friends of mine, of ours, like Father John Deere, who has advocated for the nonviolence of Jesus to be central to what is coming out of the Catholic Church in this moment of history. And the Pope has rightly said that just war criteria cannot even apply in a time where the artillery that's being used is of the scale that it is today. Like, we have our first large-scale drone war with AI being fought, in terms of what's happening at the moment. And people need to be asking really important questions about that. But in the vacuum of that trip is people going, oh, all we're left with is realpolitik. So the ends justifies the means. And you combine that with American exceptionalism, and you combine American exceptionalism with Christian nationalism, and then you add to that American pragmatism, and it's like, hey, it works. And if I lovingly had any pushback, for those who watched the funeral of Jesse Jackson in Chicago, my heart broke again to see Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright Jr. again being ignored by the pastor who baptized him, discipled him, conducted his wedding. And I remember staying with Walter Brueggemann and Nancy, maybe 2018, and we were talking about that sermon that set America on fire in the lead up to Obama's election. Walter was saying, like, it was exceptional, like, exegesis of the text. Like, in terms of what he was preaching after 9/11, it was like exceptional, like, teaching in terms of like applying it to the context they were in. And anybody who knows the brilliance of Jeremiah Wright knows that that's consistently his creativity to do just that. But those who have paid attention, Obama, who is a person of incredible integrity, a great father, a wonderful husband, very sincere, he was still head of the largest superpower in the world, and drone strikes and military spending went up under Obama, not down. And I want to hold these complexities because we turn these into simple moral plays of goodies and baddies. But some of the realities of the transformation that America needs, Dr. King is right. America is still today the largest purveyor of violence in the world. And even with America's first Black president, who came to faith in the Black church formation, still was overseeing a white supremacist, or albeit an inclusive one, imperial colonial reality, and their complexities that can't simply be dismissed in ways that ask us to choose sides. We have to hold all those things and then ask, how do we not have our ego identify with parts of that conflict and defend it, but instead be called again by that still small voice into something more deeper, more beautiful, more true, more loving, more just, and more transformative. Is that all right to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
You invite the Aussie on and like, he's like, oh, he's even going to have a go at our good guys. Thanks, Australian.
Oh, well, early on, I had written this song, right? When we started blowing stuff up in Iraq, and there were cheers on my hall in my Christian school. And the song was called Peace of War. And and when Obama decided to level up the drones, I updated it and played it at Wild Goose West one year. They did the one on the West Coast, and I had multiple people start complaining. They're like, they come to me, they're like, yeah, but, and you know, if you're asking me, was it a harm reduction strategy to have him versus the other guy in charge? Like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Would he have done a better job if Jeremiah Wright and Cornel West weren't like distanced from him and got to prick his conscience more? Yeah, because he has one.
Yeah.
And even George W. Bush, like, that's something we don't have currently. I don't think our current president loses
how
sleep.
weird is it? How weird is it that you and I are looking back at George W. Bush, considering like everything we've risked in like the no war movement, like and going, man, I miss those days. It's just like 22-year-old Jarrod would look at like Jarrod now and be like, what? Where are you? And the reality is where we are is a movement.
But see, George W. Bush probably lost sleep over it. He's demonstrated hints of critical reflection, which Trump can't even think of one thing he needed to ask God for forgiveness for, but that hasn't stopped him from being like American Jesus. And George W. Bush saved hundreds of thousands of lives for people with HIV/AIDS in Africa, and Donald Trump and Elon Musk cut it. And so the
like literally killing millions of people. Like it's
like that's supposed to be like the thing that justifies us being ridiculous policemen that somehow are the absolutely necessary tyrannical power with a Jesus face on it. Is that we're like, you know what? Yeah, but we outgive and support these things. Yes, half the time it supports secret CIA plots to control other countries and make sure the right person's in charge. But who do you want in charge of your natural resources and access to cheap labor other than us? We're great, but still, there were a lot of people's lives that were better, and then we dodged that junk.
And Trip, this is why I'm like a lapsed Christian anarchist. I remember when I was going to the US to study, I remember my dad saying, and I know that socialism, I actually wrote an article maybe in 2013 for Sojourners about Martin Luther King and the S word. Actually, I think it was about Les Mis as well, like, and how Les Mis is actually Les Miserables for. Do Americans shorten it like that as well, or is that just an Australian thing?
I don't know. I was a theater person from middle school on, so
you know what I'm talking about.
You're going to try to convince me that Hugh Jackman didn't have some auto-tune and help. I'm not gonna do it.
And we won't even go to other Australians whose singing wasn't quite on par in that. But there was this weird moment where white evangelicalism was like, hooray about a romantic socialist text that like Victor Hugo wrote Les Miserables as it is a is a directly, like, it's not a Marxist text. It predates Marx, but it's part of the family of socialism. And so my article was about like the S word and how this isn't actually a tradition that's foreign to America. It's just forgotten by America, and what it is to actually re-engage this tradition. My dad said to me, being a part of this tradition, as union movements have often are in other parts of the world. I know that's not always true in the US when it comes to police union and others. But Dad said to me, when you go to the US, consider like the Christian anarchism I was identifying with in my early at 20 years old, and consider like what that actually does, because you're about to encounter a reality where there isn't universal healthcare, and where university is an elite privilege for some if they can get scholarships or have money. And Dad, though on the other side of the world, was kind of with me as I saw all these American realities, and I was like, you're right. Like Australia's tradition, although it's been eaten away by neoliberalism, of like being one of the first nations in the world to give women the vote, one of the first nations, first nation in the world to elect a workers' party as the major party, which has now become the Labor Party, which is actually the party that is now leading us into this war with Trump. We have both soldiers, Navy personnel who were on the ship that sunk illegally in international waters between Sri Lanka and India, this Iranian ship sunk by the US with Australian soldiers on board, and over 150 Iranian personnel were left to drown in the waters, despite like that being illegal in terms of international law. I think it's 86 confirmed dead at this stage, and Australia has just sent planes to Iran as well, and like, so all that's happening. And so one of the things I want to say in a very long-winded way of getting there is the beauty of Christian socialism, particularly a nonviolent democratic vision of Christian socialism that is present in the Black church tradition, needs to be rediscovered by American Christians at this point in history. It is feeding so many of us elsewhere in the world, and yet I talk to so many Americans, and they're often not even aware of this social imaginary and what it offers the world.
Yeah. Okay, well, quick thing. After Easter, after the class with Dom, Gary Dorian's actually joining to do a class on the whole history of socialist movements in America, and the goal is to like let everyone know, like, no. Before there was neoliberalism, before the left edge was the age of big government is over. Like there was a time that governments were worried the churches might be too organized on behalf of the dispossessed.
That's right.
Okay, but two other things about you said, the worried about the S word when you go to America, but you're glad to find out that they love pre-socialist texts with deep socialist vibes, like Les Mis. I'll also say that they are really big fans of Jesus, and that does not create tension. They can read the Gospel of Matthew and even think God wrote it himself, and that doesn't mean that they've ever picked up on anything that actually gets Jesus killed. It's just, again, the American hermeneutical lens is significant.
I've just found Reverend Dr. Andrew Wilkes, who's amazing, incredible preacher, as his incredible wife, from the Double Love Experience Church, which I think is like the Bronx or Brooklyn. He's got a great article out called is it Reimagining Politics with Dr. Anna Julia Cooper, and he talks about the Black church and Christian socialism and those kind of. I think most people are aware. Oh yeah, I think that's how Cornel West self-describes, and doesn't realize that Cornel West self-describes that way because of the whole tradition of the freedom movement, and that was true of mentors of mine like Uncle Vincent, Dr. Vincent Harding, and Reverend James Lawson, and so many other figures, including Reverend Bernard Lafayette, who passed last week, who like incredible contributions to the freedom movement.
Yeah, and Jesse Jackson, like you mentioned earlier,
My
talked about
goodness, yes.
advancing economic democracy.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr. was much more explicit about it, like, later in
Mm.
his life, which is what got
Because
him.
of Coretta Scott King's influence. Did you know
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
I'll,
yeah.
I'll try and find this article I wrote, but it was Coretta that was pushing Martin in that direction, which I love.
Yeah, and here's the thing, that came up actually, last week. No, it was this week's Q&A, but last week's lecture for the Lent class with Dom, where he's, like, telling the story historically of, like, the move of the capital, to
Mm.
going up next to Tiberias,
Mhm.
seizing the commons of the lake, and then now we're exporting all of it and sending it out, creating this
Mm.
system where all of a sudden, there's this economic squeeze, and the middle class of that area, like fishermen, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
once that squeeze comes in, it's like putting a belt on someone and squeezing it. Now it goes hourglass. So all of a sudden, there's
Mm.
this group of people who not weren't rich, but were stable.
Yeah.
But now everything in the lake is, you gotta pay for it. You gotta have
Mhm.
access to it. You gotta be the right people, and most of it isn't going to feed you, it's going over here. You can't just, like, go fish from the lake and get food, you gotta do
Mhm.
this, and so all of a sudden, there's this big chunk of people from the middle class that become the precarious class.
Mhm.
And Dom makes the point, looking at people's history. Richard Horsley
Yeah.
does a lot of it for New
Mhm.
Testament times, but
Yeah.
the People's History Project in general, it will track how this works across revolutionary movements. That like when you get a group of people who see that the world the powerful are creating are ones where they can be dispossessed of a place in it. Right,
That's
where
right.
the people essentially the mercantile class, trader class, farmers, fishermen, these kinds of things are alienated from sustenance.
Yeah.
Then now you have the makings of a movement.
Mhm.
And Dom's sitting there going, there's a 700-year tradition called the
Mm.
prophetic tradition.
Mhm.
But you always have to ask, like, a people will keep around a tradition, but when does it have traction? And
Yeah.
Jesus, after John dies, right? I'm not gonna take up his ministry,
Yep.
calling out and coming out. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna announce,
Yes.
I'm making it
Yeah.
present. And then he doesn't stay in Capernaum where it makes sense. He goes where?
Yeah.
Right next to where
That's
the
right.
exploitation's taking
That's
place.
right.
And who are the
Yeah.
disciples? They aren't nobody, they're fishermen. Right?
Mhm.
And so they
And suddenly Ched Meyer's, uh,
binding of the strong man.
commentary, yeah, just comes alive where it's like, "I will make you fisher of men," is
Yeah.
actually about calling out the injustice, calling out these monsters which animate, calling out all this stuff that's underneath, not merely about like, "Hey, why don't you, go around and
Hey, buddies.
invite invite people, to
And
invite
he's
Jesus
just
into
now
their
being born,
private
but
spirit."
Paul's gonna have a really cool road you can walk him down. But, like, I say that because, one of the things that I noticed, because there's a couple thousand people in the class, get lots of
Mm.
questions, and then I'm trying to, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, what are the most popular topics and stuff?" And I narrow them down and then try to fix, and I send them to Dom, and he gets done, like, we're going through, like, all the history questions and stuff, and over half the questions had something like, "Did I hear you say X? Because X really sounds like X2 currently going on, so what do we
Mm.
do about it?"
Mhm.
And the volume of those questions has gone up every week.
Yeah.
And this is, 2,500 people that probably their minister listens to the podcast and they told them to
Mhm.
do it or whatever. But I mean, I've done a lot of these classes and read a lot
Yeah.
of questions and normally get 2 or 3 that go like this, not 70.
Yeah.
And so I say that because it is overwhelming, as you were talking about at the beginning, that we can get just as parents thinking about this or citizens thinking about what we do
Yeah.
together as Australian America and these kind of things.
Mhm.
But just like that one feature of going, "Oh, all these people are naming like this. Like, what if we're getting to a point
Mhm.
where the absurdity and vile, monstrous nature of those holding power now, like combine the war
Yeah.
with a tax policy, with Doge, with Epstein cover up, just go through the list.
Yeah.
We literally have 3 or 4 companies that are the only thing that are making the market make money, and they're making the market make money by stealing everything everyone has ever written on the
Yeah.
internet, and pretending like we gotta pay them for the only faucet to use it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then apologizing and handing you a couple $1,000 if you find out they stole all your books. And so,
Yeah.
like, they what
This is
what
the
a
start
stealing
of
of the common.
techno-feudalism, right?
Yeah.
This is why so many people have hoped for something to replace capitalism. Like, if Giannis is right, what's replacing it is
Oh god.
worse. We're going to have to rent, like, reality. We're gonna have to, like, subscribe to democracy and be able to keep playing while,
We
making
already
a
do though,
mass
but
serfdom. We
maybe
already
yours
do,
works
and
better.
that's what's
Maybe
so.
yours works better, but I'll just say the people that subscribed were sitting behind the president as inauguration, and they all have
That's right.
billionaire
Yeah.
before their first name.
And the sooner America can move away from a two-party it's a bit like the family on the street that got the first computer, and it's like, "It's 2026, your Atari isn't that impressive anymore, stop plugging it into that TV
Oh,
that
no,
no one
it's
else
vintage.
owns." And people are like, "Oh, it's cool, it's vintage." But when it comes to democracies, like, America desperately needs an update. Like, there are new
I
operating
don't think we
systems
need to
which
call
distribute
a
power.
Congress right now. We're gonna really have to wait till the representation differs. Do you understand? Like,
But but
we
true.
could go to bed one night and then wake up the next one that just the oldest male in a home gets to vote.
Lord have
Like,
mercy. Yeah. Yeah. And well, and this is the importance of, like, what you're doing, in terms of homebrew, and creating those spaces, that liberation theology is not merely a set of, principles, it's certain practices. And the base communities are essential. What it is to create listening communities where people can dialogue, where we can go through that cycle of silent prayer, of, media boundaries, of building community, being able to grieve and rejoice and celebrate and form new imaginations and take collective action and discern those next steps. That's necessary in community. So some of the things, we've been doing in my setting is, what does it look like to have, like, a liturgy that's informed by history yet open, to, God's future, that is, accessible, like, in ways that feel like charismatic, but where Sunday services themselves are actually experiments in democracy. And that used to happen, like, in lots of different traditions. And it used to be like, even if it was just, we're going to vote on, are we changing the carpet in the sanctuary, or is, the gymnasium getting new floorboards? And those kind of decisions, people used to work out discipleship and conflict, through, like, discerning together those kind of, all of that, the seeker friendly megachurch, like, the Willow Creek saddlebacked Hillsong, etc., of the
mhm.
church, means there is, like, autocratic absolute power at the top, and people are like, how do we get in a situation where, Christians voted for Donald Trump? It's not merely what Christians believe often follows practice. It's what's been practiced. Like, we no longer have congregations, we have places that, distribute religious goods and services, and
Yeah.
people judge it on how it's felt on a Sunday. And so, both at Steeple Church in Melbourne, one of the things, once a month, we have a service that is, communion happens around tables, and everything, the sermon itself is like a round tables discussion, listening to one another, playing with things, bouncing off things. A table in the trees, here, on the other side of Australia in Perth, literally every Sunday we gather is a workshop. The message and the liturgy itself, happens in ways that redistribute power. And I think being conscious about that and trying to experiment, and I know that's easier for, low church folks than it is, high church folks. But we have to create certain spaces. And what, liberation theology, across, the global south has shown is that it's completely possible in Catholicism. So it should be possible everywhere else. Second Vatican opened up, possibilities for, communities to have, like, deep experimental, democracies, that are deepening democracies, that feed into systems that, even if they're fascist, have little embodied circles of democracy in their midst. And I think that's what we desperately need. Churches, again, have to become places where we engage a different kind of power, and that power is distributed amongst all of us, where every voice is lifted up.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm glad we got to 2 of the 19 topics I put on bullet points. But okay, I want to ask you a question, and then you can tell me if I should edit this out before I put it on the internet. But okay, I know as Australians, you have this experience. Like you even shared it earlier. Like y'all did this crazy thing, and turns out we're sitting on the boat helping out, right?
Yeah.
I thought for a moment when the Prime Minister of Canada basically called out the sham that things were going to shift, and it only took us a couple weeks to get everyone back on board of how the train rolls. But we had our Secretary of State basically say out loud, we went to Iran because Israel's going to attack anyway, so we may as well join.
Yep.
And that's the first time I've ever had anyone, let alone the Secretary of State, say that we make our dumb decisions, but they're usually ours, and y'all have to deal with it. Now, for some reason, a client state, generously described, decided that we all get to go to war, and there's not anything we can do but just decide to preemptively strike with it. So I have never, like, that is a whole nother level of anger that went through me, which I assume comes with some weird, sick, twisted sense of peace that at least I live and am a citizen of the country that never happens to. So what do you do with that as Australia, or if you're any of the other countries that get stuck with leaders justifying whatever the hell America thinks is a good idea? Like, what do you do with that? Because I also know underneath that there are horribly anti-Semitic people that equate Israel with Judaism.
Yeah.
Which is just dumb, wrong, vile, and horrible.
Yeah.
But as the nation state, like playing our leadership, assuming the Secretary of State's telling the truth, he's more likely to than our president. But you see what I'm saying? Like,
I totally
Australia's, y'all have to do that for us all the time. This is the first time I've felt that our government just did something, and the explanation is, well, we're friends with them, so I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah. I think it's in this article, Trip. I've got that little section on chickens coming home to roost. If you'll indulge me, democracy can never be exported. There is no way to democracy. Democracy is the way. Hat tip to one of America's greatest union organizers, A.J. Muste. Amir Césaire, the Cameroonian philosopher, reminds us that the imperial boomerang effect. With help of Malcolm X, we might explain this as the colonial chickens coming home to roost as fascism. The USA's slide away from democracy at home is not unrelated to the installment of undemocratic policies and leaders abroad. Doing an Iraq in Iran, end quote, not only greatly increases the threat of civil war in Iran, and some suggest that that's the overall plan, just endless civil war in Iran. It actually greatly increases the future threat of the same in the so-called United States of America. I think America is starting to experience its own foreign policy at home. That's why lawmakers in Portland are trying to resist it turning into another Minneapolis. The reality of my friends in Minneapolis and, mums sharing up their exercise group now being like a mutual aid, like wing that is feeding people who can't go and shop. America is starting to experience these realities, and American regime changes elsewhere, and the WikiLeaks files spelt some of this out. John Pilcher has talked about it, but Australia actually did have 3 years in our history since becoming federated in 1901, where the UK or the US weren't dictating our moves, and we were independent. And we had the UK representative of the Queen remove that leader with lots of question marks next to it, and find out that it was an Anglo-American conspiracy to remove that prime minister. My youngest son, Gough, is actually named for that prime minister, Australia's most left-wing prime minister in history, Gough Whitlam. But these kind of stories are important to tell, because it actually opens up possibilities for, yes, it brings all this grief flooding in, but it also allows incredible possibilities for solidarity, for realizing that America isn't exceptional and won't be protected from these realities, and is feeling it now. And if we can take these moments, and my mate Dave Andrews, who was an important influence on me, he wrote a book called Christianity, which, if you've got high school students who are interested in any of this stuff, give them Dave Andrews' book, Christianity. It's kind of a great introduction. Dave always says that one person can make a point, and two people can hold a conversation, but three people can create a space. And every time I hear our Lord say, where two or three are gathered, I think of Dave Andrews going, there's a space. Like, what is it to actually create little spaces where, even if it's just this cycle, who is going to help? You know, evangelicals love accountability buddies. Have accountability buddies for, like, what is it to return to the silence? What is it to actually have boundaries around media intake? What is it to actually gather with one or two others to process what we're going through and take action, and then discern together what's the next steps? We have to draw from the best of anarchism, which is a subset of the socialist tradition of building the new world in the shell of the old, is how Dorothy Day would put it. But we can't fall into the self-righteousness, the naivety, the more hardcore than thou kind of attitudes, and the escapism of disregarding that we have real agency, and voting for the less horrific option actually saves lives. And so you do that while building in the shell of the old. We can't disregard that. And if that seems like, well, my purity is being compromised, yes, good, grand. That's the way it should be. That's how Jesus works. Go touch yucky politics and trust that love is more powerful. That's how holiness, Marcus Borg makes it really clear, that's how holiness works in the ministry of Jesus. It's you know, Volk would put it, it's not exclusion, it's embrace. And we've got to have the kind of faith that this kind of love is more powerful than that stuff that we're involved with. Trip, can I share? It's one of the things that Christian pacifists often feel really uncomfortable with is the reality that we do have soldiers in the early church. And one of the things that those who hold to the just war tradition, let alone those who like embrace holy war, equally want to edit out, is the reality of why we know these soldiers were in the military in the early church. Because they stood in this strange place, and I think your last article, which was so brilliant, speaks to this as well. Bonhoeffer himself, his witness, speaks to this. We know they were in the military because they refused to wear the amulet and they refused to bear the sword, but nor did they leave those places of what Dorothy Day would call the filthy, rotten system. Instead, they stayed and they engaged with a different kind of power. And the reason why we know this is because we have records of their martyrdom. And so what is it for us to engage in the filthy, rotten system, but not with the tools of the filthy, rotten system, knowing that these systems that we're pointing out might collapse on us, but that is the faithful, confrontational, nonviolent, liberating love we see in the life of Jesus, and what it is to practice resurrection, as the early Anabaptists would talk of. That's the kind of practice, like whether it's Wendell Berry or walking in the resurrection like the early Anabaptists, that's the kind of eschatology I think we need in this moment. Practical, pragmatic, a vision that animates with a hope found in community. So my encouragement, find 1 or 2, 3 others, build a little hub of an alternative, but don't join the Essenes and run off. Actually challenge directly these systems that we are all part of.
Yeah. Well, so before we wrap up, I want you to tell everyone where to go check out your stuff, because there's so many cool things. There we didn't get to all the stuff on my list. I really like the whole connection of Judith Butler and Oscar Romero thing you did on.
Oh, thanks, mate.
That's really good. And Judith Butler's Nonviolence book is my favorite of her books, and not because I don't like the others, but anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's tons of material there, along with engaging both like bad takes on Revelation and a much more liberating one. Don't you want to find out how John the Revelator is a guerrilla poet? That's a whole section of my notes for this conversation we didn't get to. That the lion is the lamb indeed. Come on, don't you? There's the lure. There's all kinds of stuff there structured. And I would say, for those that are thinking about, like, oh, what would it be like to facilitate a conversation around this? The way in some of those, I don't know what you're going to call them, mega posts, where there's all these different things and links out. It's a real easy one to scroll down through and then think of your community and be like, well, what would be a helpful touchstone to start a conversation? Yeah. Let everyone know, because you're new to Substack and stuff, and I'll make sure to link it with the conversation.
Oh, thanks, Trip. That's kind. Yeah. So I've been on Substack for 4 weeks, and I don't want to be an evangelist for another problematic platform, but it's been lovely for me. Like it
very nice like to have an algorithm
15 years ago
that like rewards. They win when they show you stuff you'd actually like to read, and not hold you there to show
outrage
advertisements.
Yeah. No, that's been really lovely. And I had a mate contact me just before we jumped on and said, this is great, but you need to make this 10 Substack posts, not 1. So if anybody wants to give me feedback on how to write better for Substack, I welcome that. Other places that people can find me is, Jarrod McKenna, JARRODMCKENNA.com. And the Good on Wood podcast, which I do with my mate Steve Charlotte in Cape Town, which is a quote from Daniel Berrigan: if you're going to follow Jesus, you better look good on wood. And it's about what contemplative trouble looks like in this age of rising fascism. There's that podcast out there. My brother, Dr. Drew Hart, and I continue to do Inverse, and there's the communities of Subversive Seminary and Decolonizing Sunday School, which people continue to ask to restart, but I'm not sure where I'm going to get time. There's Inverse podcasts as well. That's probably enough, mate. That's but yeah, I would love in people to let me know on Substack. I'm really enjoying that space. Let's connect. Let's make a little gathering.
Yeah. And if someone's listening and they say, man, I'd love to hang out with Jarrod, and you would like to get him a ticket so that he could fly to Theology Beer Camp this year, I'd love for you to let us know.
Oh, that's so kind, Trip. Trip, can I confess, like, even when Obama was your president, because of my arrest record, I would be detained sometimes for hours on end. That was under Obama, right? Like, so I'm not sure, but if people would like to come and visit me in Australia, that would be
really level up your Substack. You just start writing from detention.
Yeah.
I think you're good now though, because you cut your hair. I feel like
Yeah.
that like totally safes out. Now, like if you just got a Dave Matthews Band t-shirt and
And like, who would thought that we in 2026 would be going, wow, the politics of some of the members of Nirvana are like really gross, but Dave Matthews, like, he's got great politics. Like,
except for that time they emptied the tour van poop thing right off the river and then splattered down and stuff. I mean, I've heard that variations of that story. It's kind of sus. But,
right.
these days that's just like a minor problem.
Yeah. I tell
There's
you
no
what, Trip, in the latest, just for a kick, if people are wondering like what Trip's talking about, I didn't get a haircut for 15 years until actually it was when you and I were hanging out at Wild Goose in like 2018. And it's the first time that a person of color said it's not appropriate, your dreadlocks. And I was like, oh, fair enough. And I got a haircut that week. The realities were just different. But yeah, it's, if you want to laugh at the fact that Jarrod didn't have a haircut for 15 years, there's a video from 17 years ago of me responding to Mark Driscoll's preaching that is in the latest Substack article that I just put there to make my mate Brian Recker laugh. So if anybody else wants to laugh at that, check that one out as well.
Here's the question. What is the through line of Mark Driscoll? Well, when he was like, I'm postmodern, or I'm an angry Calvinist, or I'm no longer Calvinist. I love some freedom, especially the freedom of markets to help me win.
Well,
Like
Trip,
the
I
only
think
thing,
it's I think it's this, right? Like, and I had Marxist mates at university, like in my late teens, early 20s, who were saying this, and I was like, nah, because I was reading a lot of Derrida and Foucault, who, I mean, Foucault would be in the Epstein files if he was still around. Like, the brother's dodgy.
the picture kind of gives it away, right? Like, has he ever had a picture where he didn't look a little bit sus?
But those Marxist mates have always said that postmodernism itself is a de-radicalizing force because it relativizes truth claims. And even though it's initially created space for alternative stories and allowed us all to question the meta-narratives, it's also removed the teeth from any, like it sits in the place of Pilate saying, what is truth? Which is the kind of stuff those of us who live in our kind of societies say, because we have no proximity to where the bombs are actually falling. If we want to, I mean, Cornel West again, like the nature of truth, reflecting on the Christian tradition, reflecting on the crucifixion. The nature of truth is to allow suffering to speak. And I think the through line with Driscoll is like postmodernism set him to question a bunch of stuff. But I remember as early as 2002, Trip, and after the invasion of, no, maybe 2003, I think it was the invasion of Iraq, and Driscoll preached this sermon, and it's the last sermon I've ever listened to from Driscoll, where he's like, regardless of whether you're in the anti-war movement or whether you're part of the pro-war movement. And I was just like, what the hell? Like, we've left discipleship now. That's not a Christian response, but he's trying to hold people together at Mars
Well,
Hill.
he's not trying to hold
Seattle.
them together anymore. He's
That's right. That's right.
he's not even trying.
All of that should have told us way back then that the biggest indicator is whenever we have sold out somebody who's suffering to take part in a conversation that we hope to be transformative, we have left the place where Jesus is standing.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of that bit, right, in one of his last letters where Bonhoeffer says, like, the whole little letter to his friends 10 years after starts with, like, do we even have anywhere to put our feet? And then when he gets to the very end, he says, the only thing basically I've learned is if we're trying to understand what's going on, you have to look from the perspective of those that are suffering.
Amen.
That's what we've learned, right?
Amen.
And I think that the one of the through lines of the kind of feeling like we're in an echo of from Iraq is the American church. I mean, it's true across the West, but we're just so gifted at never considering what it's like to be on the other side of our foreign policy
Oof.
or on the other side of our economic system that exploits and extracts the planet and the poor.
Mm.
And we think, oh, well, if they were in this situation, they would do X, as
Mm.
opposed to saying, we're in this situation. So what are we
Yeah.
called to do? Right. And I'm not saying
Mate.
it's easy or always clear,
Yeah.
but there are just some like it's that no one even thinks about it, right? Like I
Oof.
I could just so understand someone saying, you know what, Trip, I think you're really smitten with the possibilities of like mutual flourishing.
Mm.
Um in the post-war situation, the best of all possible worlds. The reason we don't have nukes blowing up all the time is because America is actually the best possible one to lead that. Yeah, they could say all this stuff and they could believe it.
Mhm.
And like, but they would be saying it thinking, like, I not that we're good, just that of the crappy situations of institution systems and powers
Mm.
that are full of human beings with our human predicament, like it could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
And so I'm committed to this. Like I could understand that. And they're
Well,
like, wait,
true.
wait, wait.
Uncle Vincent, Dr. Vincent Harding, he
Yeah, yeah.
was fond of quoting Langston Hughes and his poem "America has never been America for me." And I think there's a lot of people in the US who are of European descent who is realizing that America isn't them America for them either in this
Mhm.
moment. And uh, rather than running from that reality, again, what is it to hold that in the silence and actually be confronted with our own experience of a power, of powerlessness, of the weakness of God, of what it is uh, to be called into resurrection, and actually weep over those realities and find ourselves forming community that actually builds something in the shell of the old. Trip, we didn't even get to talk. I wanted to ask you about like process theology and when it comes to eschatology, particularly with these kind of because as you know, like I love David Bentley Hart, the bits I understand. um, uh, I don't know if you've got, but you know, as we're in the midst of the beginning of another illegal war, how do you think about uh, process and eschatology? And I know you talk about it a little bit in your book, like in terms of that which doesn't violate the integrity of relationality. But how open is open, and is the is the best that we can do either Oliver Clement's kind of like it's already here and death is the experience of it straight away. So it's the orthodox kind of transfiguration of all creation, but it will never break into reality as we know it because our knowing is bound to life itself, which I find a bit like, oh, come on, like, because most of the modernists kind of Kingian beloved community, we will build a new, most of like mates of ours like David Gushy. David's like, no, I played that too hard. Like, I can't hold that in this moment. Where are you in that kind of thinking? And I guess to spell out the other option is like there's going to be a magical, violent intervention that will kind of just press pause on everything. Help me, Trip.
Okay, I'll give a short answer and then just say I'm happy to have a whole hour and a half conversation about that because you'll
Mate, let's
probably
do it.
ask a follow-up where then I start using philosophical words then or whatever. But
Mm.
like a few things. I don't like either one of those options. I guess it's somewhere in between. But like the big observation is like the time scale. Like
Hmm.
uh it took like well, based at least on our planet, you know,
Mm.
13 point
7.4.
something billion
Mhm.
years to have multiple cellular organisms.
Yeah.
So, like, if we're thinking about eschatology and the horizon of it, and knowing that we're only one planet of all the billions
Mhm.
at this point that could be inhabitable, the idea that we would make our biosphere the sheer ultimate horizon of all things is a bit weird.
Hmm.
So, like, I would always ask myself, like when thinking about the witness of Israel and the early church, um, like what does it mean to trust the character of the one who's being witnessed to, but not their like cosmology and timelines. Um,
Hmm.
and then think if what we're experiencing here among our the story of life on this planet and this and the emergence of spirit among us as species. Think about like the axial age, where like all of a sudden
Mm.
across the different wisdom traditions that had never met over a short period of time, it comes online that
Mhm.
ultimate reality in whatever form isn't primarily wanting us to petition it to
Mm.
for divine favor, but to express its character towards our neighbor, right? And you see it emerge
Mhm.
in the Hindu traditions.
Yeah.
Around the same time the Hebrew prophets are making the point.
Mhm.
I have a couple indigenous scholar friends that have talked about how it shows
Mm.
up in indigenous
Mhm.
cultures in North America, and so I'm just trusting them.
Yeah.
But you know, but so like that happened. Um, it takes a particular form through the person of Jesus, and so like I feel like there like if we think the proper question being answered is either it's all fully realized right now in some form, so get over it if you want more, or the only solution is dramatic intervention, then we're missing that both what that time scale says. The time scale says
Mm.
God is extremely patient and always been faithful, so that a quantum fluctuation in a vacuum eventually is moved by loving your enemies. Like
Mm.
that is a patient love that's been with creation, confident that things could emerge that a quantum fluctuation in probability space did not hold it no it could contain, right? And so like if we ask ourselves like how can we have a solution where the good God of all creation's characters expressed in history, then I think we just got to go, well, the Holy Ghost has been rocking this for billions of years before anyone could even
Oh,
sing,
man.
let alone use a prayer. So like let's just take a big deep breath and think like even if our species goes train wreck in the next few weeks and you hit a reset button on how life's moving in this planet, like the one Jesus called Abba isn't sitting there going like, well, I guess I'll have to intervene or else it's, you know, it's in vain, right? And so it also like the intervention is an abrogation of what God's main modality has been, right? Like slow, patient, inviting love, or if you think of like even the history of Israel, Hesed faithfulness.
Mhm.
Um, and so like that's like the macro thing. The other thing I would say is once you see the big scale thing, once you think of um like the fidelity of God, the biggest shift for me when it goes to the nature of hope is some people have hope. Like if you think of C.S. Lewis's image of like God has a book and you know you're experiencing it while you're reading it, but it's already set. Or you can have hope because you know who's with you. And it
Mm.
functions very much like a flashlight, right? Like you know who's going with you, and the
Mm.
horizon you can see is there for like and you're trying to obviously be attentive and responsive, but the the goal is to be faithful in the present,
Mm.
knowing that the one who calls each and every one of us has a dream that involves each and every one of us. It
Amen.
doesn't leave
Yeah.
enemies behind. So, like, do we want to put our anxiety in explaining the like ontological requirements for if God is trustworthy, or
Mhm.
is God trustworthy precisely because God was the one who is faithful?
Yeah.
Um, be it to the people of Israel, faithful to the one that died cross dead, and that wasn't the end. Has been faithful to a church that thought, hey, Israel had a difficult history. Let's try to level up. Like the if we think of that our hope is ultimately in the Lord, which the Psalm says all the time, and as Christians we trust that what does that God look like in sandals? And we tell the story of Jesus. Take a deep breath and go, what do you really think your imagination could hold what new creation looks like? Because that is about as reasonable as a quantum fluctuation in a vacuum at T1 being like, will you just wait till fully consensual erotic sex happens while they're slightly tipsy listening to Counting Crows?
Oh,
I was just thinking of a really good night. That's
right. Okay. Hey, judge not, lest you be judged. Right, that's
yeah. You gotta it could personally, if it's soft and tender, it should be it should be the acoustic live album.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But anyway,
like
you get
Marvin Gaye or like some classics might be like my go-to, but I appreciate you sharing on these levels.
It just depends. It just depends. Maybe it's just triggering to bring up Counting Crows because it's another guy that didn't cut his hair for a long time. And, but have you ever heard the story of why Adam cut his hair?
No, but isn't there like a new documentary?
Oh, on HBO, it's so good.
Right. Okay.
That we could have an hour, 90-minute discussion of Counting Crows as well. After we do eschatology, could totally explain Counting Crows.
So when we do, because in my head, I'm like, how would both Tripp and DBH, David Bentley Hart, consider, like, because that's the back and forward, right, for me, like in terms of what's the container, and all of it is like above my pay grade. So I'm like, how do what's the container for the practice? And this is why probably like Anabaptism and the Catholic worker movement and Quakerism have been such an important like shaping thing for me, because it's very pragmatic. Like discipleship is like prime for, and it's a bit like crossing on the resurrection, where in debating NT, right, he's like, look, whether you think it's historical, and we won't go into what we mean by that, or metaphorical, and we'll leave that one alone for the purpose of this conversation as well, it's pragmatic. And I think everybody needs to be yes and amen. Like that's so when we do talk, it's this kind of, I'm going to throw two sentences at you, and we can pick this up another time. Right. The book of Revelation no more predicts the future than Harry Potter does. This is from the latest Substack. The difference is the book of Revelation does unveil God's future in Jesus of Nazareth in history as victor. Who wants a roadmap or a timeline when God wants to give of God's self in the Son through the Spirit? To which obviously the answer is left behind, readers. But like with that aside, that's the conversation I want to have with you. Is kind of like where Moltmann meets the patristics in conversation with process stuff. That's
so if you send me like the thesis things you want to talk about, because especially if you're asking me to compare to David Bentley Hart, I want to actually make sure I go look at it before. The last thing I want, having seen what happens when you don't fully articulate his position accurately, I at least want to have thought about it recently before telling you. And I remember at some point, I had a student in Edinburgh that we got in a conversation about it, and he was like, here are like 8 things that are important to David Bentley Hart. And I was like, I like 5 of them. One of them probably, the other 2 are triggering. And like, but like he'll tell you that my God's a demiurge, so it's all good. But the now I just derailed, but there's something about what you the question, like, I mean, even if you take like the Harry Potter one, right? Like, and you're thinking about Revelation and Harry Potter, the question is what you do with the Elder Wand at the end of the story, right? Like
see, apocalypses are everywhere. Like, that's
Because
right.
is it do you break it and chuck it or not?
Mm, mhm,
Because it's ultimately a question of power, and, like, the whole story of Harry and his friends and resisting the Death Eaters, Voldemort and company, is coming to trust that, like, the power Voldemort was after is
mm.
ultimately feeble in the face of genuine loving community. And
That'll
so,
preach.
like, what are you really protecting your community if you keep the most powerful wand of all time? He
Mm,
did what Dumbledore couldn't do. Dumbledore protected it by wielding it, and he protected it by getting rid of it, right? Like,
yeah,
where is thy sting? Check it.
yeah,
Like that, like you go like, "Well, is it true?" And like the follow-up is like, "I don't know. Did Sam and Frodo, like, fucking, like, take the ring to Mordor and it get destroyed?" And you're like, "No, it's not reasonable," right? Like,
yeah,
and then you think like, "Okay, well, was there really someone walking on the road to Jericho that got jumped and these 3 people walked by?" And, like, like, so many times we ask the dumbest questions
yeah, yeah, that's right.
where, like, as opposed to, like, getting the end of Harry Potter and then saying, like, "Have you been paying attention in life?" Because you might have encountered friends that y'all could trust each other so much
Mhm,
that you just, like, nod and know when you
mm.
could seize the fruit or the wand
The ring or the
and
wand or the
or the
yeah,
wand or the ring, and, you could be like, "No, I could bow my knee and now be the slightly kinder Caesar." And you could say, "No, no, no, no. Get behind
Drew,
me, Satan," or chuck it
do
off a bridge, or, so,
do you
like,
know, Colton Barnaby? He's a little younger than us. Man, I love this brother. Like,
I
it
recognize the name, but I don't know
yeah, I
why.
quoted him in, uh, my latest
Okay, well, then
Substack,
that's probably why I recognize the name.
uh, and he was like his last article is called "Pledging Allegiance to the Bible," and this is where, again, it's a question of containers for me for discipleship, knowing that the containers themselves are above my pay grade. Um, and wanting to stay in intelligent conversation with lots of different places, particularly those who don't share my faith. So, like, it's accessible. They're like my weird mate Jared. This is where he's coming from. But one of the things that Colton, he self-identifies as a Christian uh, atheist. And again, it for me, it's a question of containers, and yet the tradition that's formed him, and what I see you doing even in those examples, and I meant for Harry Potter to be a flippant example of something in popular culture, but you took it and you actually practiced like what Dave Bentley Hart's whole book on tradition and apocalypse is about. That it's this
Mhm,
constant, dynamic, disturbing unveiling that troubles. And here we go again. Like, here's this unarmed, anointed one who is reaching out with a power stronger than a grave again in all these different myths that we trade in. I find that I find that so helpful and so fascinating, and again, a point of meeting, much like uh, John Dominic Crossan's talk of like, what do we do with resurrection? How does it
mhm.
become a practice? And the rest is kind of interesting conversations while we do the work, while we work to like remove support for this latest illegal war. Let's have these really interesting, rich conversations, because the Australian temptation with the anti-intellectual kind of thread that runs through Australian culture, which we don't publicize, but is definitely there. But would you say that there's definitely that in a US kind of imaginary as well, right? Anti-intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's, like, 5 countries in one,
That's right. Yeah.
and there are 2 of them that are very much that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really
The
interesting.
pragmatist one isn't anti-intellectual, it's just strategically
Hmm.
intelligent, and,
Yeah.
the questions that matter or more like what questions matters more problematic than like, oh, are you going to think through it reasonably or engage X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z? It's like
Well,
the
and in a very
American
real sense,
constitution for
James
the
Cone
elite.
is a product of that. Like when Cone talks about in his earlier work about whether it's Luther's questions of how is Christ present at the table, while for his people historically the questions were how is Christ present under the whip of the plantation owner.
Mhm.
That is the best of American pragmatic. I think didn't Cornel West do his PhD on American pragmatism, and I can't remember now, but I know that's a tradition
Well,
that he draws on as
yeah.
well.
I mean, yeah, he's definitely a part of the American pragmatist. But I thought philosophy deliverance came out of his dissertation, but I don't remember.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Um,
great name, Prophesy Deliverance. What a great name for a book.
it is catchy. It is
Yeah.
catchy.
Mate, this has been so much fun. Like, there's so much more that we'll just have to try and find more opportunities to hang out. This is great.
Yeah, it's been a blast, and thank you, those of you that have joined live, and those that listen later, and definitely go check out Jared's Substack because he's new. You gotta be kind and welcome him
Oh,
the
thanks.
community, and we'll talk to you again soon. And if you're one of those people and you're like, no, if you're going to talk about David Bentley Hardin process thought, then you have to answer this question. You feel free to send it. And we'll
Please provide the answers.
yeah, well that too. We'll grade them. We'll grade
Yeah.
them.